manager might interact with Axon. You can see here I'm logged in as Kate Amory. In this use case, Kate Amory is a marketing manager looking to plan a new campaign for a particular target market. In order to do so, she wants to come into Axon and see if there's any existing data set that she can leverage rather than starting from scratch. She wants to reach out to all active female 25 and over customers who earn more than £30,000 a year. And she's going to have a look to see if there's any data set which will allow her to do that. So if we come in and click on search, that's going to bring us into the heart of Axon, an overview of the different facets. We can see here that her 6 default facets are in view. There are also many more that she could bring into sight, but the one that she needs for this purpose is actually already in sight here. If I click into dataset, Kate might begin by typing the word customer. This is going to give a view of every dataset that has the title with the word customer in it. So we can see a few different options here. Customer data, customer details, corporate customer details, probably not going to be so helpful for a marketing campaign, but maybe active customers is going to be the best bet at a glance. So if we narrow down the search just to that, because obviously Kate is only looking to reach out to active customers, then just by looking at these facets, we can understand what kind of thing is in this data set at a glance. So there are 23 different attributes. So those are going to be the different fields within the data set. These are linked to glossary terms. It looks like there's quite good coverage on these attributes being linked to centralized definitions, which is a good sign of good governance. We can see that this lives in the data lake. We can see an overview of which policies it's connected to, and so on and so forth. But to get to the real detail of the data set, we're going to have to click into it. Here we can see that we are now in the active customers data set. There's some information we could see from the top level view, but we can now also see a little bit more detail. For instance, we can see the definition of the data set is that it is an extract of all active customers. That sounds good at first, but it's not particularly specific. It might be relevant for us, therefore, to dig into the documentation around this. We can see that a document has been attached to this data set, which talks about how they identify what counts as a customer that's active. Different people might have different criteria, different standards. It could be a customer who was active in the last 6 months, 1 year, 5 years. Here we can see exactly how they got there, so that will be helpful for Kate when she's planning her campaign. Can also see that there's an active status, it's confirmed, so it's got some good governance around it, and it's public. So somebody has created it for a particular purpose, but they are willing to share it, they want it to be used, it's in this open place, it's not hidden from us. So all in all, this is a good start for Kate. She's got an idea of where this data is living, how it's been determined, and that it's public and being used. So, in order to get a little bit more detail about what's within the dataset, we can click into attributes. These attributes are going to let Kate know exactly what columns are populated in her dataset. So we can see the column titles. That's going to give her an idea of if she could use this dataset to create the right target audience that she wants. So we mentioned that she's looking for reaching out to active, which we know these customers are, but also female customers, customers who are only over 25 and earning more than 30,000 a year. Now, gender is obviously going to let us filter out anyone who isn't female. Income is going to enable us to focus in on 30,000 and above. And down here we can in fact see date of birth as well, so that will give us whether or not they're 25 and over. So far this is looking good. Kate's going to be able to focus in on the particular segment that she wants to target for her marketing campaign. However, we probably want to understand a little bit more about how the data has got into this data set. Does she trust the lineage? If I click into the relationships tab, I get a map, but I'm just going to click over here to make it bigger in its own page. Here we can see the full view of what data is flowing from other data sets into the data lake and out of the data lake downstream into additional datasets. Because it's a dataset lineage view rather than a system lineage view, we get a little bit more detail than we would just from system lineage. We can see that, for instance, that the party data dataset and the counterparty master dataset are both in the CMD system, but they have different sources and both feed the active customer dataset in the data lake. So we're getting quite a clear view of how the data is coming in, but if we want to see actually which attributes are coming from where, we can add the linking attributes overlay. Now we can see specifics. So if we click, for instance, on gender, we can see exactly where that's coming in from the registration website or from the paper form over here. Maybe called different things at different points, but we can see that it's linked together. It's all the same concept, really. Now, another thing that we might want to check before we go forward is the data quality of the data we're looking at. So is there any data quality measurements on this data? We can see, yes, that there are some measures upstream. We've got certain measurements being made in the website and in the CMD system itself on this data set. There's also some measurements being made in the client portal, but actually potentially some risks here. So it may be that we want to actually measure data quality directly within this data lake rather than going back to previous sources, which we can see there have been some dodgy pieces there. We might want to check it, make sure we have the direct DQ results before we send out any marketing campaign. Obviously, we don't want to get email addresses wrong. We definitely don't want to get genders wrong or names. All of these things could be damaging to our brand. So we're going to make sure the data quality is up before using this extract. Maybe impose a local set of rules on this extract here. Something else we might want to check before we launch this campaign is if any policies are going to impact how we run it. We can see here that GDPR is pretty frequently mentioned throughout these different datasets. So GDPR is having an impact because we're using personally identifiable information. And so when you're using that for certain purposes, you're actually going to have to process based on a legitimate legal basis. So in this case, if you're using it for marketing, for instance, you're actually going to have to process based on consent. So we need to check if we actually have marketing consent in these systems, if we've gathered that detail from the customer before we think about sending them out any marketing communications. If I go back to attributes, I can have a closer look and see if I can find that marketing consent. Here I can see consent is in fact gathered and can be seen to be coming from somewhere upstream. I can see this red highlighted line shows where it's being traced from. So I can see it's coming in on this side from the registration website. Marketing consent is being gathered, but actually it doesn't seem to be being collected in relation to the paper form. So there is one means of collecting personal data where consent may not be gathered. We can see it is in fact traced down to the web portal, but this is a gap. So what are we going to do about this? We could try and think about filtering out the data that came in from the paper form. Now, if we return to our attributes view, we can see that actually data source, so the way in which the data was collected, has actually been captured here. So we saw that in the lineage map, and we can see the detail of it here. It says that whether the data was captured via a paper form, the registration website, or the client portal is in fact listed in this data extract. So what Kate could do is actually just filter out everything that was collected via the paper form, just in case that consent isn't there, because we know it wasn't necessarily gathered in that more old-fashioned way of collecting data. Potentially that predates GDPR requirements and it wasn't seen as necessary. So the safest thing to do would be to get rid of those customer details and just focus on those that have been gathered via the website or portal. So if Kate's happy to proceed, she's worked out what her filters are going to be. She's going to have a little think about who she needs to ask in order to get access to this data. So if we click into the stakeholders tab, we can see We've got a good set of governance owners around this data set. We've got a data owner, business SME, a steward. We've even got owners for some of the specific attributes that we're going to be using, and we have a broad stakeholder community. So it's looking like this is a well-used data set, it's well-governed, it's catered for, but can we use it for our purpose? We need to actually raise a change request in order to find out. So we're going to request access to the underlying data using this change request. If I click into it, we'll see the detail. Here we can see Kate's just explained she's launching a marketing campaign, wants to use it for this data set for it, and how can she get access to the underlying data. Now, she maybe hasn't given enough initial detail, so it's possible that when this first task came up, so Patrick Dewald had the option to validate this request, he actually did ask some clarifying questions. So who would the marketing campaign be for? Is this in line with GDPR? So on, have you considered GDPR? Which of course we have. So since Kate is able to put his mind at rest, this was able to move on to the second stage of this workflow, where the data owner is reviewing the access request. So this is currently with Darius to be reviewed. Once he approves it, the data steward will organize access to the underlying data set, or if it is rejected, Kate will get the reasons why, and then she can begin and to find her data elsewhere if there's a valid reason for her not to use this data set. Any commentary can be added here along the way, and as we see as well, any documentation can be added. So here we can see some analysis has been made by Patrick Dewald. He's mentioned that the requester has confirmed this would be okay for marketing purposes. She's been warned about GDPR, and a resolution will be added when Darius has decided whether or not this should actually be granted. So Kate has been able to come into Axon, have a look at the existing data sets which relate to customers. She's narrowed it down, found one to do with active customers, which is what she needs, made sure it had all of the relevant details for her to be able to filter out anyone she doesn't want to aim her marketing campaign at. She's got a couple of concerns around data quality, so we'll make sure to enhance that and have a data quality check done on her data set before using it, but she's just trying to get access to the actual data now, and that is with Darius. So she's been able to come in, understand where the data is, and make some progress towards running her marketing campaign. Thanks very much.